And if you could press got it, that way you will remain in this series. Tonight's presentation is being hosted by the Yavapai County Master Gardeners. We are part of the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Every county in Arizona has a cooperative extension, and you may be familiar with some of our other programs such as 4-H, food safety, nutrition education, STEM and commercial horticulture, and small acreage support. Master Gardeners provide science-based horticultural information, and tonight's presentation, as I said earlier, is Hey Birds, Welcome to My Yard. Our presenter, Joe, has moved to Prescott in 2017 from Houston and became a Master Gardener in 2019. Her primary interest is in native plants and obviously birds. She is a member of the Prescott Audubon Society, where she and her husband assist with field trips and monthly bird walks in the Watson Woods area. We are excited that she is sharing her knowledge about birds that many of us see in our own backyard. With that, take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Lauren. Tonight's presentation is really a brief introduction to the topic. The first part is about how to make your backyard more welcoming to birds. And then at the end, we'll look at a few of the common birds that are in the Prescott area that could be attracted to your backyard or may already be in your backyard. So I'm going to get started here. So why would you want to provide a bird-friendly yard? And these are a few reasons. For pure enjoyment, education, to help your flowers become pollinated, for weed and insect control, and just to help out our wildlife. So let's look at the first presentation, the first reason here. Birds are everywhere. Even the duller colored birds have intricate feather patterns to observe. Beautifully colored birds can take your breath away. Bird behavior can make you laugh. Birds provide a connection to nature and encourage social interaction as individuals join with others to watch birds. Listening to bird songs can be relaxing and provide stress relief. As you become more interested in birds and providing habitat for them, you spend more time in nature, possibly increasing your physical activity by working in your yard. And birds add beauty to your day. I started my day this morning with a group in Granite Creek Park, and we saw some very beautiful birds like Bullock's orioles and many different kinds of brightly colored warblers. It's just a great way to start your day. And watching birds in your backyard also provides activities and fun that you can share with your children and grandchildren. And for those of us that are in the older age range, learning to identify birds stimulates your brain and your senses. So it's a great activity. Flower pollination, insect and weed control. Hummingbirds and orioles sip nectar from flowers and are very efficient pollinators. In this photo, you can see a little hummingbird on the left of the screen sipping the nectar of this hedgehog cactus flower. Many birds eat a variety of insects that you might prefer not to have in your yard or garden. Aphids, slugs, grubs, caterpillars, spiders, and mosquitoes all may be eaten by bluebirds, cardinals, chickadees, grosbeaks, nuthatches, woodpeckers, warblers, and sparrows. Last week, while I was working the help desk at the extension office, I was reading a bulletin from the Colorado State Extension, and it was talking about striped pine scale is eaten by several common birds, including house finches and yellow-rumped warblers. We have house finches here and yellow-rumped warblers in the Prescott area. Many birds consume seeds, and most birds include at least a few seeds in their regular diet at the end of summer and into winter. Doves, finches, sparrows, and towhees are especially fond of seeds. And here are some photos of some birds. The left photo is a hairy woodpecker. He has a grub in his mouth. The upper photo is a wren. I think it's a rock wren with a grasshopper. And down below is a blue grosbeak eating seeds in a, looks like a big patch of blue mustard. That's probably from my backyard a few years ago. Conserving wildlife by creating a backyard habitat is very important for the ecosystem. In September of 2019, a study was published in the journal of Science that estimated there were 3 billion fewer birds in North America than just 50 years ago in 1970. While birds are still everywhere, we are seeing less of them, and certain common species are losing more individuals over time. Common species like dark-eyed junco, western meadowlark, white-crowned sparrow, and pinyon jay, all birds that are present in our area, are in decline. Your backyard can be a critical oasis for birds. Providing proper habitat helps not only our local resident birds, but also those migratory species that pass through the area each spring and fall. This slide shows some 7 simple actions to take to help birds, and one of those is using native plants. There's a short video that you can access on YouTube that was put out by the American Bird Conservancy. It's 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes. It's you Google 3 billion birds lost, and I think Lauren is going to put that in the chat box. It's a short video with some very beautiful photos and some information about the loss of habitat. So let's look at some of the things that you can do to provide a bird-friendly yard. The 3 things that birds really like are water, cover, and food. So the upper photo is a photo of my backyard when we moved in a few years ago. And the first thing we did was put up feeders, and you don't have to do that, but we did. We put out water and feeders, and I started adding plants. And I wish I had a photo of the backyard now because it looks a lot better than this. This is a winter photo. Obviously you can see the snow, but I have more plants now. But just doing this little bit, putting out these things, helped get us more birds in our backyard. And one of the first things that you'd want to do is put out some water, because living here in Arizona, we all know that to bring wildlife in, you just need water. This is the one amenity you can provide that will add birds to your backyard with a minimum of work. Birds need water to drink and to clean their feathers. Watching a bird bathe is really a joyous experience. It makes you laugh. Here are some tips to make your water station most desirable to birds. You want to keep your bird bath low and make it shallow, site it well, keep it clean and open, and if you can, add a little bit of motion. Most natural sources of water that birds use are on or near the ground, so keeping your water basin on or close to the ground mimics nature. The water level should be about 2 inches or less. If your basin is deep, place 1 to 2 large flat stones in the bottom for the birds to perch on, or place a layer of gravel in the bottom of the basin. The stones also provide better footing for birds while they are bathing. Just like people sometimes need a bath mat in the shower, birds prefer a non-slippery surface in their water basin. And this photo is just, it's a house sparrow, and the water basin is a simple top of a rain barrel with a little water in it, and there's a stone, and it's placed on the ground. And that's still the kind of water bath that I use now in my backyard. Very simple. You could use anything flat like that. You want to site your bird bath well. Place the water feature where you can easily observe the birds using it. That's why you have it there. You're wanting to see them. The water feature should be handy to a water source for easy cleaning and refilling. And if you're considering heating it for the winter, you might consider the location of your outdoor outlets. Protective cover should be nearby where the bird can flee if a predator approaches, and shade is always appreciated, as the bird bath water will be cooler and evaporate less in the shade. So the upper photo is a spotted towhee in a bird bath. It's not my bird bath, that's another photo from somewhere. And it shows you that there is the bushes close by, so that if there were a predator that would come close, the towhee could flee to the bushes. The backyard, lower back picture of the backyard is my bird bath, and it is hung up. If you can see that rain barrel cover is hung up on the arbor, because in my area, I do have an issue with some cats that come in my yard, and this way the birds can drink and not worry too much about the cats. You want to keep the water basin clean and open. Feathers, leaves, seeds, sticks, and poop will accumulate in the bird bath. Algae will also grow quickly in the warmer months. When the basin needs cleaning, scrub it with a soft bristled brush, and you can use a little bit of bleach to get the algae out, but be sure to rinse the basin well if you use bleach. Providing fresh open water in freezing weather is important to birds. Consider using an electric bird bath heater, or simply add warm water on freezing mornings. The birds will appreciate it. You can see on the lower left photo, that bird bath is a heated bird bath. It has the element contained within the actual basin. And we have an outlet, and we put it up on the cinder blocks, because after the first time we had a big snow here, we realized that the snow would cover up the water, and it was hard to find it. So, and then you can see how on the second photo in the upper right, how the snow kind of builds up along the edges, but the water is still open in the center. And that was much nicer than having to run out there in the snow and try to put some water in the bird bath so that it would be open. You also want to add a little motion if you can. It attracts birds, especially hummingbirds. And if you're lucky enough to have like a waterfall feature, that's really great. But most of us don't have that luxury. So this little solar powered device kind of wiggles the water, and it makes it more attractive to birds. So you also want to provide cover as in trees and plants, essential to attract and retain backyard birds. The cover provides shelter and shade, protection from predators, and places for the birds to raise their young. Birds need shelter and shade just as we do. Have you ever seen birds sitting in the sun with their beaks open, panting? We all know how hot it can get, especially in the summer. And this is a photo of a couple of house finches up in the scrub oak, hiding up there in that cover. Cover provides birds a place to hide from predators. Have you ever seen birds abruptly fly from a feeder into the brush? Often this can be because the birds sensed a predator, such as a hawk. Birds are very vulnerable when feeding. It is really quite amazing how many of them do survive. So the photo on the left is a Cooper's hawk sitting up in the elm tree. He was watching the bird feeders. The domestic cat is a bird's worst nightmare. According to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, cats are second only to habitat loss as the largest human-related cause of bird deaths. It's estimated cats kill approximately 1.3 to 4 billion birds each year in the United States alone, with 69% kills attributable to feral or unknown cats. And in the upper right photo, you can see the ginger kitty that visits my backyard, that we have a love-hate relationship there. And plants and trees provide places for birds to raise their young, to make their nests. And in the upper right photo, upper left photo is a great horned owl nest with some young owls there, owlets. And in the lower photo, you would have probably recognized the American robin with some nestlings waiting for some food. And if you want to do a little extra in your yard, you can make a bower, like the photo in the upper right. You might leave out some leaf litter or some brush piles. And at the end of the season, when your flowers in the fall, when the flowers have finished blooming, the wildflowers, don't deadhead all the flowers. Leave a few of those heads there for the birds to come and eat the seeds. And who doesn't mind a few extra minutes you know, not having to rake up all the leaves or not having to deadhead all the flowers. And it helps those birds. And if you do want to provide feeders, providing a variety of different feeding stations can give you a 5-star rating with backyard and migrant birds, if you're willing to do that. And so these are photos of just a few of the different feeders that you could provide. Most people are familiar with the hummingbird feeder. There's a little Anna's female sitting up there on the hummingbird feeder. The middle photo is a Niger sock in the front. That's a really great feeder for lesser goldfinch. And there's a tube feeder behind it. It's on a post. But the Niger sock has the little bitty Niger or thistle seed in it that the birds go and they just sit on the sock and pick the seed out. There's another tube feeder on the right with the house finch. And the lower right is a summer tanager on the suet feeder. And then on the left is a quail block, which could be placed on the ground too. Just that's the photo that I had. Out of all of those feeders, the suet feeder is a great attractant for birds. You really get a lot of different birds with that suet feeder, and they're fairly easy to maintain also. So let's take a look at some of those plants that might prove attractive to different birds. I love these photos. There's the left is a juniper with the berries, and that beautiful bird that would take your breath away is mountain bluebirds. They're eating those juniper berries. And the upper right is an Anna's hummingbird female at the salvia. And in the middle are sunflower plants. And there's a little lesser goldfinch, which you probably can't see in this photo. They're on the sunflowers, but that provided great cat TV for my indoor cat. I planted the sunflowers and couldn't believe how well they grew. And then the finches came in and were just all over them. And he got to sit there and watch them. And it was a great entertainment for him. So when you look at the different types of plants that you want to have, you want varied habitat levels. Those attract a diversity of species, from birds that forage in the upper levels of the canopy like warblers to those who feed on the ground like spotted towhee. Native plants are more desirable as the birds know those plants and they take much less care and less pesticide use. And of course, if the plants provide food like berries, seeds, cones, or nectar, the birds will be delighted. Different birds are attracted to different plants, so the diversity of the plants will assist with attracting a diversity of birds. So let's look at large trees. Some of you may be lucky enough to have some of these mature trees in your yard now, or if you're getting ready to plant, these would be sort of the species that would attract more birds. The pine, cypress, and juniper produce cones with seeds that many birds eat, such as the scrub jay, mountain chickadee, and nuthatch. Many warblers forage for insects in the pine and oak tree species. The hackberry tree provides small berries for birds such as bluebirds and robins. The hackberry tree is not the most, the most beautiful tree, but it does have a lot of positive qualities. It's a tree that is easily grown, it grows quickly, and it has those berries on it. And it does have some fall color. Mistletoe is frequently found in oak trees, and that's a favorite of bluebirds and the phainopepla that is here in the summertime. All of these trees provide dense leaves or needles and branches for nesting. Sycamore and cottonwood trees frequently have knots or areas where a dead branch may have broken off that cavity nesters like violet green swallow and woodpecker can use for nesting. Oak trees are particularly attractive to birds. They seem to harbor a lot of caterpillars and insects, and then they also have acorns. So an oak tree is a very valuable tree when it comes to a bird attractant. And here are a few photos of some of the tree species. The photo on the upper left is a large cottonwood. It's was taken in Granite Creek Park, and there is a couple of cavity nesting holes up at the part that doesn't have bark. You can maybe see those on your screen. The lower middle photo is a group of scrub oak on a trail near my house in the neighborhood, a cut-through trail. And lower right is the Arizona cypress. You can see all those nice pollen cones on it and some of those waxy berries. And the middle photo is some juniper and another type of pine. And then there's a mixed pine oak juniper on the right-hand side at the upper portion. It's really hard to take really great photos of big trees and put them on a screen like this, but I did try. Then let's talk a little bit about the understory or shrub plants. This is where most of us are able to add to our landscape. Many of these species produce flowers in the spring or through the summer for nectar sipping birds like hummingbirds and orioles. Then the flowers turn into berries or fruit for those birds that like fruit, such as robins, phainopepla, bluebirds. Some of the sparrows wind up eating some fruit. And these are all great species to plant. There's a photo of the desert willow that I planted in my yard. It's the upper left. The middle photo is a Wright silk tassel. Those plants are hard to find in the nursery, but they are excellent bird plants. There's some of them up in not the Constellation Trail. There's another trail that has a lot of Wright silk tassel, and every spring we see robins all over them. They put out these beautiful little white flowers and then these blue-black berries, and they're very green. The photo on the upper right is a flame leaf sumac, and it has fall color. That's a photo of it in the fall with the red leaves. And it also has little white flowers or creamy white flowers, and then it berries. So it's a really nice plant, and it's a very, very fast grower, very fast grower. On the lower left is a cedar waxwing eating chokeberries in a chokeberry tree. The middle is a plant you probably recognize, the Apache plume. And the Apache plume seeds are eaten by sparrows, those flowers that put out little seeds. They'll come and eat those seeds off of it. And it also has a nice dense leaf structure that things can get in, the birds can get in and out of and hide, protection cover. The lower right photo is an Oregon grape or a Mahonia, another plant that has beautiful fall color and also yellow flowers, and then has berries that are eaten by many different species. And then we all like to have low-growing plants with flowers. These are mostly perennial wildflowers that provide nectar and seeds for hummers, finches, and sparrows. They also have are insect attractants, and the insects are attracted to and lay eggs on these plants. And then the birds will also eat the insects or as they hatch. So a lot of these species, the Augustaki and the sage salvia, the penstemons, the helia or the scarlet skyrocket, those are for nectar sippers like hummingbirds, and the other species there provide seeds for birds to eat. So here are a few photos. Upper left is Gaillardia or the Indian blanket. The center is a photo of goldenrod. The upper right is the Mexican hat. In the middle is an orange Mexican sunflower, the Tithonia, which is also a nice species for monarch butterflies. The lower middle is the scarlet skyrocket or the helia. Left is common yarrow and golden yarrow. And the lower right is the coneflower, which puts out a lot of seed for birds. And then the middle on the right-hand side is salvia, which is a good nectar source. You also want to look at having some succulents, grasses, and vines. These plants provide seeds, nectar, and nest material for a variety of birds. Finch, sparrow, towhee, and junco devour the seeds of grasses. Grasshoppers and other insects that are attracted to these are also prey for these birds. And almost all bird species use some form of grass in their nest building. So these are a few different types that you could put in your yard. Upper left is a hedgehog cactus that blooms about now. And I have a hummingbird that's always at the hedgehog cactus. The upper right is bear grass. Bear grass puts up a flower that seeds, and it also has these little twirly ends that birds can kind of pull out and use for nest building. The middle right is the trumpet vine, and that's another attractant for birds that would sip nectar, like hummingbirds and orioles. The prickly pear bloom is also an attractant for those nectar sippers. The agave on the left puts out a nice big bloom for bats and hummingbirds, and they're just a really attractive plant. The middle, with all the leaves, the middle left is a Virginia creeper, and that's another good vine. It's very drought tolerant once it's established. It has fall color, and it also berries, very easy to grow. So now that we've looked at a few plants, and those are just a sampling, you know, there are just so many plants that you could plant that are good for birds. Many of the nurseries have lists that you can go to and get a list of bird-friendly plants. You can also go to the National Audubon website, and they have a database where you place your zip code into the website, and it will bring up a list of plants for you that are specific to your area. But you do have to watch that, because we live in such a specific zone that sometimes some of those plants would not be applicable for our area. And that information is on the resources page at the end of this presentation. So now that we've looked at plants, let's take a little bit of time and look at some bird identification. Oh, I forgot about the grasses. Oh, sorry. So these are my grass pictures. On the left is the side oats grama, and the bottom right is the blue grama grass, and the upper grass is the alkali sacchaton. And those are really for seeds and for, you know, using the grass for nest building. Beautiful grasses that add a lot to your yard and don't take much water or care. So let's look at some bird identification tips. So when we're looking to identify birds, we want to look at the size and shape of the bird, their color pattern, their behavior, and to check out the habitat that they're in when we're seeing them. So this is just some basic information. So first, when you see a bird that you're not familiar with, you want to check out its size and shape. That's the jizz of the bird. It helps you to determine the bird family. Compare the bird you are trying to identify to another bird you're familiar with to determine the size. So if you're very familiar with a sparrow or a raven or a robin, you can look at the bird and say, well, is it the same, you know, the same size, or is it larger or smaller than the bird you're familiar with? And that gives you a little bit of an idea of the size. Look at the head and bill. Is the bill small and sharp, or is it thick and short? Is the head rounded? Does it have a crest? Is the tail long or short? Check out the shape of the wings. Are they broad or pointed? So in these two photos, you can see a lot of us, when we first learned to bird watch, we started looking at colors of birds, and that's an important feature, but it's also very important to do the size and shape at the beginning. So these two birds look alike as far as color, but when you look at their body shape and their bills, they look very different. So the one on the bottom is a black-headed grosbeak. He has that big conical beak that's made for cracking seeds. They also eat fruit. The one at the top is the Bullock's oriole. You see that really sharp pointed bill because they're insect eaters. They also eat fruit, but their primary food is insects. And they also sip nectar sometimes too. So anyway, so there's differences in the bill. So the first thing to do is to look at the size and the shape and get its jizz. This slide talks about color pattern. The first thing you want to do is look at the bird's overall color and then look for specific areas of contrast or patterns, especially on the face, the wings, and the tail. Look around the bird's eye. Does it have an eye ring? The bird on the upper right, in the upper right photo, has what the bird books call spectacles. It's not a total eye ring. The white doesn't go all the way around the eye. It looks like eyeglasses on the bird. They're called spectacles. That's a Plumbeus vireo. And then you also want to look at the color. It's basically a gray bird, but those spectacles are a clue to its identity. And the bottom photo, you see the color of the head and the chest there. That's a yellow-headed blackbird, which is pretty easy to guess. You see the sharp bill. Again, you can look at the difference in the bills on these two birds. That sharp conical bill, it's a seed eater. And the bill on the Plumbeus vireo, they are primarily insect eaters. It's kind of a wide mouth where it can easily catch an insect. So color, overall color and color pattern is important. One other item to look at to give you a clue to the bird's identity is to look at the bird's behavior. Look at the bird's posture and note where you are observing it. Is it sitting in a tree? Is it working its way up the trunk of a tree? Is it repeatedly pumping its tail? When the bird flies, are the wing beats fast and frequent? Does the bird flap and glide? What is it eating? Is it alone or is it with others in a big flock? Those are some of the things to think about when you're observing the bird. And this, of course, is an American robin. He's standing upright. This is a typical thrush-like posture. Robins are part of the thrush family. Their wings are kind of long and they sit up and they kind of point them to the back. So if you see a bird that has this particular posture, then you would know that it's part of the thrush family. The other clue to a bird's identity is the habitat that you are in. So if you are seeing the bird in a grassland area, or are you in a forest of pine trees? Are you walking by a lake? Are you near a creek? What season is it? Many birds migrate through our area in the spring and the fall. Some come in the spring and stay for the summer. Some just come through. Some are here mainly in the winter or in the winter. So knowing which birds are typically in an area at the time of year is helps you make that identification. So there's an app that you can download for free called Merlin, and I believe Lauren's putting this in the chat box also. When you sight a bird, the app asks you specific questions, and then you give it gives you a potential list of birds that you can look through to help with identification. So when you're first starting out and you're new at trying to identify birds, the app is very helpful. It also has a sound app and a photo app. So if you can get close enough to take a photo, it'll try and help you identify with the photo. Later on, if you're just beginning birding, the sound app also is very helpful. You can touch it and hold it up and it will listen to the bird song, and then it'll pop up different bird species that it could possibly be. It's not a foolproof identification, but it's another tool that you can use to help you if you're trying to identify birds. It also is helpful to have a field guide or some sort of something to help you with birds that are in our area. And I know that at one of our local birding stores that we have, Jay's Bird Barn, they have some fold out field guides that are specific to our area. And if you're just beginning to learn to identify birds, having that field guide that has just the ones that are here makes it a lot easier than trying to use a big book field guide. So, okay, so we've talked about plants and we've done a little bit about things to look for if you're wanting to ID a bird. And I just want to point out that you don't always have to identify the birds that you're seeing. It's just fun and educational and neat to watch them and to watch their behavior. But, you know, most of the time we get curious as to what they are, what they do, that kind of thing. So I'm going to start with a few of the birds that we see in the Prescott area. The birds that I have photos of are ones that are here usually all the time. They're not migrants. And many of you will recognize some of these. They're very common birds. So I started with the common raven photo because most everyone knows the raven. We have a lot of them around. They're up in the sky practically every day. And when you're looking at those ID things that you need to look at for this bird, you can see his big, thick, hefty bill. And they have those, they're just big, large black birds. They have that interesting call, that croak or grok, the raven. When they're in flight up in the air, you can tell that it's a raven because they have a wedge-shaped tail. That helps you. If you're in an area that has ravens and crows, that's a good way to tell them apart because crows' tails are more rounded or C-shaped, whereas the raven's tail is very wedged. And of course, the crow has a different call. It has that caw, 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 call. Crows are very smart. There have been a lot of scientific studies. They're also very acrobatic flyers, doing rolls and somersaults in the air. It's kind of cool just to sit and watch them. Many times you'll see a pair. They're like those Blue Angel jets in the sky doing all those different rolls and somersaults. Young ravens like to play with sticks. They drop them and then they catch them in midair. So ravens are pretty cool birds. This next bird is one that you also probably would recognize, the robin. We talked a little bit about the robin's posture. The lower picture shows that thrush posture with the pointed wings down. And robins are easy to identify because they're plump birds with that gray back. They have that rosy rufous kind of warm orange breast. The males have darker heads than the females, but the two sexes look the same. And sometimes if you see a juvenile robin, you'll see that it has spots on its back and breast. They have a very cheery song and they like to eat insects and fruit, and they like worms. A lot of times we see them on grassy areas in parks or lawns, and they're standing there with their head tilted, kind of like they're listening for that worm underground. And there have been some scientific studies about robins to see if they really do hear worms. And what the researchers have found is they feel like the robins really use sight more, but they can hear or feel vibrations with the worms working in the dirt. So that helps them, but they're really using their sight mostly to get those worms. In the wintertime, robins are in great flocks, and you will find them in forests and in areas in big flocks looking for berries. And they make a lovely nest. The female robin makes a lovely nest with mud and grasses, and she uses the wrist of her wing to kind of smooth the mud out and make that cup shape. She really uses her body to get that nest built. Their nests are pretty cool to look at. Another really common bird around Prescott is the house finch. The male and the female do look different. The male has the red head and the bright chest and rump. The rump is the area right above the tail on the back of the bird. So this photo shows the female on the left and the male on the right. And the center bird is a house sparrow. When I moved here to Prescott, I was entranced with the house sparrows because they are very beautiful. They're kind of like not house sparrow, the house finch. They're kind of like the house sparrows of the West because there are so many of them. And they do have a very beautiful song. So even though they're very common, they're really beautiful birds, the beautiful song. The juveniles look a lot like the females. One interesting thing about house finches is the red of their feathers comes from their food. So they eat some seeds or berries that have the carotenoids in them. And the more pigmented food that they eat, the redder their feathers are. So sometimes you will see a house finch that's yellow or orange instead of that bright red. And that's because that particular bird didn't get as much carotenoid in its food. Another really interesting thing about house finches that they feed their nestlings exclusively plant foods, which is very unusual in the bird world. Most vegetarian birds feed their nestlings insects to make sure that they have enough protein as they're growing, but house finches are decidedly vegetarian. Another common finch that we have in the area is the lesser goalfinch, a very small finch. It has a very conical bill. You can see that in that upper left bird. The males have a black cap, a greenish back, and they have black wings. So there's a male at the left, upper left, and then at the lower right. The front of the bird is yellow, and the females are kind of olive looking with a pale yellow, and they have wing bars. So the other birds in there are females or immature birds, which look pretty much the same. They are also seed eaters. They love thistle and sunflower. The plants, after they've bloomed and they have the flowers, you'll find goldfinches sitting on your sunflowers or your thistle flowers eating the seeds. And they eat Niger and black oil sunflower seeds in your feeders. But they're the ones that love those socks. They like to sit on those socks and pull out those teeny tiny Niger seeds. One of the larger common birds is the mourning dove. The mourning dove has a plump body. It has very long pointed tail and a very small head for its body. They have a very pretty mournful song. And when they fly, the wings make a very loud noise. They're kind of startling. They're ground feeders, and their favorite feeder seed is white proso millet. One of the really interesting things about pigeons and doves is they're the only birds in North America that can suction water into their esophagus. So when you watch a dove drink, they put their head down into the water and they suck the water up just like they're sucking water through a straw. Whereas most birds, I'm sure you've observed, they dip their head in the water and then they tip it back so that the water will go down their esophagus. But doves are a little different. Those small things that we notice when we watch birds in our yard. This slide is an Anna's hummingbird. This is the most common hummingbird. It's mainly seen in the summer, but if you leave a feeder up, a hummingbird feeder up, there's usually a one or two that overwinter. It's a medium-sized, stocky bird. The male is the most striking. It has this iridescent magenta red head and throat, as you can see in that right upper photo. It's kind of like a red balaclava on its head. The females and the immatures have a bit of reddish pink feathers on the throat sometimes. And those red feathers that you see on the male, you don't always see. Sometimes they just look dark because it depends on how the sun hits the feathers. So that makes it a little more difficult sometimes for identification. Anna's hummingbirds or most hummingbirds, their body temperature is very high, or probably around 107 degrees. When the outside temperatures fall, Anna's and many other hummers can enter torpor. Their body temperature can fall as low as 48 degrees Fahrenheit. When the outside temperatures warm up, then the hummers become active again. So this torpor allows them to survive winter cold, or when the nights are really cold in the spring. So this is one of our common woodpecker species. This is the acorn woodpecker. Their habitat is mainly pine and oak forest. I'm sure you've seen these if you've done any hiking around Prescott, but they do come to your backyard. They're a medium-sized woodpecker, and the distinctive thing is that facial pattern. You can see the white eye with the dark pupil, and then the red, and then the white on their face. When they fly, you can see 3 areas of white, one in each wing and one at the rump. One of the interesting things about these woodpeckers is that they're very gregarious and they live a communal lifestyle. So young woodpeckers stay with their families for several years, and they help to raise more young. The young birds, the juveniles, are born with dark eyes. The eyes turn blue, and then they turn white at about 3 to 4 months. So if you're looking at an acorn woodpecker and they have sky blue eyes, you know that you're looking at a juvenile. The other interesting thing about them is that they stash acorns in the dead limbs or a dead tree, forming granary trees, and they prefer pine trees. They do not injure the trees because they only stash them in dead trees or dead limbs. And they can have up to 50,000 acorns in one tree, which seems amazing. And the other thing about them that's kind of interesting is that, you know, acorns will dry and they become loose in that hole. And the woodpecker is smart enough to go and check his acorns and make sure that they're not going to fall out. And if they get loose, he goes and he moves the acorn into a smaller hole. That's a pretty smart bird. Another one of our woodpeckers is the hairy woodpecker. The hairy is about the same size as the acorn. And you can see it has that a black and white pattern. There's a white slash patch in the back that runs down the center of their back. The male has the red patch on the back of the head, but the female does not have the red. And their bill is about as long as their head. For those of us who moved here from eastern states, there's another woodpecker called a downy that's a little smaller than this. And that's one of the ways that you can separate the downy and the hairy is by the size of the bill, because the hairy's bill is about the same size as its head. Although that's really hard out in the field when you're out there looking at them. They especially love the larvae of wood boring beetles and bark beetles. So they're a great bird to have if you have bark beetles. Maybe we need a lot more of those hairy woodpeckers around here. They are attracted to suet feeders in your backyard. And many times when they make their nest, they nest in a cavity, as most woodpeckers do. They put the entrance hole on the underside of a branch. And scientists think this is possibly to discourage sapsucker or flying squirrels from taking over their nesting cavity. One of the smallest woodpeckers here is this ladderbacked woodpecker. And you can tell that they get their name because they have neat black and white stripes that look like ladder rungs on their back. They have a buffy face with some black patterns in it that go into the head. The male has the red crown and the female has a black crown. And they are insect eaters. They like to forage in the bark, and they are attracted to suet feeders in your backyard. And this woodpecker at one time was called the cactus woodpecker because it can also be found in desert habitat. The largest of our woodpecker species is the northern flicker, and it's about it's sized between a robin and a crow. It is brown overall with a white rump patch when it flies that you don't always see when it's sitting. It has a lot of black spots and bars on it. The underwings and the tail show red. In the east, you have a yellow shafted flicker. This one is called a red shafted flicker, and that's what we have here. The males, both sexes have a black bib. The males have that red cheek stripe, which you can see on the two left photos. The right photo is a female, and there is no stripe. One of the interesting things about flickers is, we all think woodpeckers are up in trees pecking for insects, but flickers often eat ants, and they get on the ground and they hammer at the soil, just like other woodpeckers drill into wood and eat those ants. So they're great to have around to get rid of some of those big red ants. And they are also very attracted to suet. And we see a lot of these birds at the suet feeder, particularly during breeding season when they're feeding little ones. So there are a couple of jays that are very common around here. The Woodhouse's scrub jay. It's the size between a robin and a crow, a dusty bluebird with some gray above and gray underneath. And you see that little bit of white at the throat. They have a really long tail and a long, straight and pointed bill. The bill allows the birds to reach into a pine cone when it's just beginning to open to extract the seed or pine nut to eat. And scrub jays also have been seen standing on the back of mule deer, picking off and eating ticks and other parasites. They're very gregarious. They're attracted to sunflower seeds and peanuts at your feeders. They like juniper berries too, grass seeds, and they'll even eat little lizards. Another jay that we have that's primarily in evergreen forests is the Steller's jay. It's about the same size as a scrub jay, but at a distance, it appears very dark. It has a black head. The body is all blue. It's a very beautiful, beautiful bird. And this bird is a bird of picnic and campgrounds too, because it's very adept at begging for food. So it not only eats insects, seeds, berries, nuts, animals, eggs, and human food, and it likes also to cache food for future use. So you see it a lot in pine forests, and it will eat suet, peanuts, and sunflower seeds at feeders. So I'm running a little bit out of time here, so I'm going to speed up. This is a white-breasted nuthatch. It's a small bird with a large head and almost no neck, about the size of a sparrow. They're gray-blue on the back, and then they have that white face. There's a black cap on the head and neck that frames the face, and it kind of looks like a hood. They eat insects and seeds. You see them going up and down tree trunks, and they are attracted to sunflower seeds and suet feeders in your backyard. Nuthatches get their name from the habit of jamming large nuts, acorns, or seeds into tree bark, and then they whack them with their sharp bill to open them and get the seed inside, kind of like a jackhammer. Another of the nuthatches here is the pygmy nuthatch. It's a very tiny bird, smaller than that white-breasted nuthatch, but it has the same body shape. And you can see it has a brown crown, and the underside and the throat is white or creamy buff. The tail is very short. Their call is high-pitched and squeaky. They constantly forage up and down pine trunks and branches and in the needles for insects and seeds. They're attracted to backyard suet and sunflower seeds. And pygmy nuthatches are unusual in that in cold weather, they roost in tree cavities in large groups. And they also can use hypothermia like the hummingbirds do, the torpor, to survive cold winter nights. So I have a couple of more little cute birds. Here's a bridal titmouse that you may have seen in pine, oak, juniper trees. They love oak trees. They eat mostly insects and spiders, gleaning them from the leaves of trees. And they also eat acorns and the larvae that are in acorns, and they break open plant galls, those galls that you see on oak trees and other bushes, to get the larvae inside the gall. These birds form monogamous pairs that stay together year round, and often they have a third adult helper, usually a male, that joins the breeding pair to assist with tending and feeding the young. This is a red-winged blackbird. We see these mostly in marshes and grasslands, but they come to your backyards if you have grains or seeds on the ground or grasses. You frequently see the male atop a cattail singing its song. Its song sounds like conk-a-lee, conk-a-lee. It's a black bird, and you can't mistake it with those red and yellow shoulder patches, but the female looks totally different, except she has the same bill. If you look at the bird, the bills are the same. She's brown and streaky, where he's black and has that beautiful wing patch. Sometimes you can't see the yellow, you only see the red, but the yellow is there. This female builds an incredible nest. It's a very beautiful bird. Here's some western bluebirds. The western bluebird is a very social bird. You usually see them in groups. The photo in the top right shows males and females. The female is gray, a gray buff with that light orange chest, and the male is a very bright blue with the orange vest. And that lower left photo is the juvenile with the spots. So they have a little bit, a few spots. They're larger than a sparrow, that's smaller than a robin, and they are a part of the thrush family. So if they're the one on the left, you can kind of see that thrush pose. And they like to eat insects. They're attracted to mealworms. If you are inclined to put mealworms out in your yard, they nest in cavities, but they depend on other species to excavate the cavities. So if you put up a bluebird nest box, they're very likely to inhabit it because they're looking for places to raise their young. And then I have a couple of more sparrows here, a little chipping sparrow. This is one of our common sparrows that are here year round. They have a brown russet colored cap stripe on the top of their heads, and they eat seeds. The female of this species is very picky about where it builds its nest. It starts and stops nest building. But then when it finally builds the nest is just a loose cup of rootlets and grasses that's so flimsy you can almost see through it, which is kind of interesting. The other sparrow that we see a lot of is the white-crowned sparrow. These are here mostly in the winter. They breed in the north. They're a stocky sparrow. The two photos on the right and the lower photo show the adult white crown. They have the color pattern on their head, the black and white pattern, and the bird on the left is a juvenile. They look a bit different. Their shape and size, the jizz is the same, but you notice that the color pattern is different. But they all have orangey, sometimes pinky orangey bills, and they're stocky. They eat seeds of grasses. And one cool fact about them is when these birds arrive on their breeding grounds in the north, they pair up a nest. At the end of the summer, the pairs split up and they all winter separately. But when they return to their breeding ground the next summer, if the same two birds are there, about 2/3 of the pairs reform and nest again together. And the last bird that I have is a spotted towhee. It's a large, chunky sparrow. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this bird. He's out calling a lot right now, looking for ladies, singing that drink your tea, drink your tea call. He has a long tail, a thick pointed bill, a black head, and has those spots in his wings and that rufous front. And they eat insects. The cool thing about towhees is if you sit and watch them, they do that towhee two-step where they jump and scratch and jump and scratch looking for bugs in the leaf litter and on the ground. They eat all kinds of beetles and spiders and grasshoppers, and then they also will eat some seeds. But it's a really cool sparrow. And these are some birds that you might see during migration. And they're here, well, 3 of them are here now. The lazuli bunting is the top left. It's a beautiful bird. It's one of those birds that takes your breath away. And they're here now. They won't be here forever. They come through in the spring and then they come back through in the fall. The bird on the left, lower, is that black-headed grosbeak. They're here all summer. And the 2 on the right, the upper one is a western tanager. I haven't seen one of those yet, but they have that really beautiful reddish orange head and then the yellow and the black wings. And the female is yellow. It doesn't have the red on the head. And then the lower is the summer tanager. That's a male. They're red and the female is yellow. I have a friend in my neighborhood and he calls the male Colonel Ketchup and the female Mrs. Mustard, which I think fits them appropriately. And they will come and stop in your backyard to eat. The grosbeak and the bunting come for seeds. The tanagers will come to a suet feeder. But you can see them out in the parks and they're beautiful, beautiful birds. And this last one is just a photo of a Gambel's quail. We all probably have seen some of those. They're ground eaters. Or the female doesn't have that black mask. It's more of a plain face. They eat all kinds of seeds. They like sunflower, cracked corn, millet, and milo. If you're going to provide seed for them in the yard, or they will eat off those quail blocks. And the neat thing about them is they're little babies. When it's pretty much time for them to hatch, the female calls to the babies that are in the egg and it awakens them, I guess, or it's time for them to hatch, and all of the eggs hatch at one time. And then their little guys are able to not take care of themselves totally, but they're not altricial. They're not naked and without feathers and not able to care for themselves. They can get up and run away if they have to. And you know that they always have a big brood, and we see them running from cover to cover. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Great, thank you, Joe. I just love this presentation. I'm a bird lover, and so you just captured my attention throughout the whole presentation and during our practice sessions. You might want to put the next slide up so they can see your references.
Oh, thank you.
And just want to point out that Joe's husband, Paul, and David Reynolds and Corey Shaw are responsible for the pictures that you see. So they're real live birds in real live backyards. This presentation will be posted as always on our website, which I also included in the chat box. So you can get this information probably in about 2 days. I also wanted to mention that we will be having another presentation on the week of May 24th. We are still confirming what topic that will be. So again, if you're not on the mail list, you can probably in a week go to our website and get that information. So Joe, I have a couple questions for you. Bill Maines wanted to know, are ravens and crows closely related?
Ravens and
crows?
I believe so. I don't know that for sure, but they're very similar. I think they're both corvids, but I'm not positive.
Okay. There's a lot of chatter as far as from the people attending about different birds that they have in their yard and identifying. Cynthia Brush said goldfinches that like to eat greens too. They pick at their chard and sunflower leaves.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Kim noted that she had 2 eggs hatch, mourning dove eggs hatch, and she's now got 2 more eggs in the same nest.
Cool.
Bill Maines again, is it more accurate to say bill instead of beak? And Cynthia said yes.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Let's see. So Kim was asking if she had ladderbacked woodpeckers, and she says it eats my suet and goes to my cottonwood trees. What are the birds with stripes on their heads? They look like a sparrow but have long tail, and they hit my window. One hit my window today.
Oh, I don't know about,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. You know, it's really hard to do a bird ID without seeing the
More
bird. And but if you have a photo, you can always go to Jay's Bird Barn and they will help you identify it.
Okay.
And the other thing I guess I didn't say is that Prescott Audubon has a monthly bird walk the first Saturday every month at Watson Woods, and it's open to everyone. You don't have to register. You just show up at whatever time. If you go to the Prescott Audubon website, you can see those times for the monthly bird walks. And we encourage people who are interested in just coming out, walking and seeing birds. You don't have to be an expert birder. It's for everybody, for kids too. And we also have event coming up May the 14th at the Highlands Center. We're going to celebrate Migratory Bird Day. That's open to the public, and that is on the website. And we're also doing a breakfast with birders at Acker Park. I think it's May the 10th. And that's on the website. And that's for someone to come and just chat about birds and eat breakfast and kind of look around and see what birds are there. So we're very open for people to come and, learn a little bit more if they want, or just to visit about birds or nature.
Well, thank you very much. And I think we're done with questions. We have lots of thank you for a wonderful presentation. And man, this made me happy just identifying some of the birds that we have in our yard.
Well, I thank people for coming.
Well, thank you for doing this, Joe. And I'm going to call it an evening. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Check out our website for May's presentation. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month. Have a great evening.